is business supposed to be something that is reproducing, or can it just be a model? Time, resources, passion. What are the barriers to CoVo life that cause us to lose focus on people being the primary purpose? Coming up. So what does it look like to take a business and make the business itself reproducing and a model that other people who want to engage in movement can then use the business and the movement principles together versus where we're sitting and the way I'm doing it in Oklahoma City, that the business that I'm in isn't necessarily one that's reproducing because of barriers.
Yeah.
Model may be you can be CoVo and do CPM work, but you don't necessarily need to do the business that I'm in. In your mind, what are some of the barriers that CoVo guys run into that we're always trying to overcome? Time is one of them. I mean, that's the biggest one. Everybody's always, do I have time to do both? What's some other barriers that come into play?
Yeah, I think personnel and laborers on both ends of the spectrum, like, it's really hard. I remember, working for you, finding good labor that would have your smiles and integrity.
Right.
That's always a really difficult thing that I think a lot of people can relate to, finding good labor. But in the same way, that's essentially what we're looking for as well in the kingdom as well, because Jesus says the laborers are few. So the workers that are pursuing the harvest, constantly looking for those people. And so I think, maybe that is something that falls into head for a way to overcome the barrier is, do you have the right filters in place when you are looking for either employees or for people to spend time with in discipleship? Because if you just spend time with everybody, both things are going to fail.
Right.
But if your filters are so tight that you only hire this exact type of person, you're never going to find that person.
You're never going to find that person.
If you're not going to disciple someone unless they meet X, Y, Z, A, B, C, D, E, F, G criteria, you're not going to find that person either.
They don't, they never exist.
And so, I think there's...
I would disciple every disciple if they were Jesus. Jesus would be super easy to disciple.
That's right. That's right.
I'd be happy to disciple Jesus. I'd just be like, go, and everything just gets taken care of.
Man, that's really good.
As if Jesus needs me to disciple him.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Just my...
What's your Davism? I would say Jesus says, "Come follow me," not hey Jesus, come follow me. Right?
Yeah, we follow Jesus around. We don't ask him to follow us around.
That's exactly right.
I think one of the other big barriers is that compartmentalization mentality, where when you have work and then church, or my spiritual life and then my secular life, those two being separate make it very difficult for someone who says, I want to do church planting, especially movement style methodology or disciple making, whatever you want to call it. And they'll have a hard time. There'll be a tension that will happen where they're going, business or my life or my work life is taking away from me doing what I really want to do. And that mentality is actually, it's compartmentalization that doesn't need to happen, because I go back to the, in particular, the Great Commission, right? So we're making disciples as we're going by baptizing and teaching. And so oftentimes, instead of looking at work as being something I have to get taken care of so that I can move on to do what I want to do, where work becomes the support, understanding that all of it is under the banner of the Lordship of Christ, and that your work is one of your entry points.
No, absolutely.
Right? It doesn't have to be your only entry, because then you're limiting yourself. But as well, not seeing your business as an entry point also limits, the opportunities. So, as an example, for me, the business was our primary entry when we got into this. So I've got customers, I've got vendors, I've got employees, right? I've got corporate relationships that I'm dealing with. I've got my own personal, business team that I'm accountable to, that's in there. And then I've got all types of marketing relationships. So Chamber of Commerce, right, that I'm active in, 3 different chambers that we're active in. It can be the local nonprofit that we partner with in terms of of donations and clothing and some of the things that we do through our business with that.
Yeah.
So I've got that whole other stream that's there. And every single one of those offshoots are going to basically get me into every segment of the city that I could ever consider. So
Yeah.
whenever I look at the business, I go, okay, not all of my focus, because at the same time, my wife and I have a 4 square mile block that is our geographic focus for the next however long the Lord has us there, where we're doing our prayer walk and we're doing our engagements, we're doing finding people of peace, right? So, but here's what's interesting is, in my 4 square miles, I've got about 10 customers that are occasional with us that live within those 10 square miles. And so it's all, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's all blurred. And I think that's a huge barrier when it comes to thinking about business and trying to keep them separate. They don't need to be separate. They all are leveraged.
So I say co-vocational.
Co-vocational.
Yeah, so I think that's definitely a consistent thing that we need to remind ourselves in our head, is, like you said, a lot of times we can be like, oh man, I'm spending so much time, and we'll allow our passion to dwane in our heart, and even let it be shown in our hands of not maybe taking advantage of an opportunity with a customer or a business or a marketing relationship, because in our head we're believing this lie that there's two separate things, when in all reality there's
I'm doing business right now, and so there's no room for the spiritual things or the disciple making things. But to be honest with you, some of the best relationships that we've had come out came through disciple making that happened because of business relationships.
Extraordinary moments are birthed out of just mundane, day-to-day, moment-by-moment obedience.
Right.
And I think that's something else in our head that, we hear about church planting movements or disciple making movements, and we read these extraordinary events in Acts and in the Gospels, and we're like, man, why am I not seeing that every single day, And the reality and the truth of that is, the woman of the well event or the demoniac event, that was a mundane, just normal interaction.
Just drawing water.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it was turned into an extraordinary God event through the obedience of Jesus or his disciples in the book of Acts. And I think that's something that, especially as a co-vocational laborer, you have to be okay with the mundane.
You have to.
And realizing that all multiplication is day by day, mundane, obedient steps, and really addition that's being modeled in a way that other people can pick up addition, which other people can pick up addition.
And we stack on top of
that's exactly right.
Multiple people doing daily mundane
That's
obedience.
right. And, if in our mind we'll believe the lie that, well, if I don't see a Pentecost happen, every Monday morning, then somehow I'm doing something wrong. Current prevailing model of church in the West is an idea that business success is kingdom success, because we've got the numbers, we've got the budget, we've got this and that, but when in all reality, it's not making disciples, it's not Jesus encountering lost people.
Yeah, and that really is a good point, because, the 3 B's, butts, budgets, and buildings, from my kind of mega church, some of my mega church background, we were measuring. And I'm not against measuring. Even in movement, we want to measure things. Like, we want to measure gospel shares. We want to measure churches planted. We got to have a way of tracking what's going on. But it's interesting, because what happened is that the business mindset bled over into the church. And so a lot of times you have churches that are running like business. That idea of kind of the business has bled over into church also doesn't work very well in the reverse. So, let's take you and I, again, obedience-based discipleship thinking. Filtering is a big deal for us, right? We want to look for those who are obedient, because we only have so much time. And that's one of the things about co-vocational life that really ratchets up is I only have so much extra time that can be devoted specifically for disciple making.
Yeah, that's right.
Because there is a point at some time where, you have to, do intentional disciple making. Yeah. So, I've done some disciple making while I'm folding people's underwear with other people, we're doing a wash and fold or whatever, or riding in the van. So we blend those together, but there's got to be a time where we're going to gather as church. That's the point, right? We get that. So the flip side is that if you take that filtering mindset where you're looking for the faithful and you're only going to spend time with the faithful, and you bleed that into business, doesn't really work any well, because the customer's always right. And if you bleed that over, then you're like, oh, the customer's not going to be one of the faithful for me, so I'm going to cut you off from business. Well, you're not going to have a business very long.
That's exactly right.
Right.
That's
so
exactly right.
There's always going to be a tension.
Yeah.
Right. Between the two.
Which Paul said that, he talked about, your relationship with those who call themselves believers but are idle or are involved in this habitual sexual immorality or whatever. He goes, don't even eat with them. He goes, but I'm not talking about those in the world. He's like, I'm not their judge.
Right.
So clearly Paul made a distinction between those he was stewarding and discipling, and the way in which he treated them and the standards he held them to as followers of the way, versus how he interacted with, and had relationships with those that were outside the church.
Yeah.
So.
And I would say that whenever it comes to business relationships that we have, the ones I kind of laid out, one of the things that was helpful in my thinking to begin to understand how do I relate to those who aren't interested, right, is a salt shaker. We're called to be salty, right? We're called to be salt and light. And so I look at it as saying, I'm just going to continue to shake salt everywhere that I am. Yeah. Through, how can I pray for you? Yeah. Through, how's your family doing? Yeah. Through, hey, there was a time in my life when, and sharing my testimony very quickly. Through 3 circles, right, where we're sharing the gospel with customers. Through whenever there's a conflict or a place where a customer has had a bad experience with us, and the way in which we follow up with that, the way in which I interact with them, show grace to them, do what's right instead of doing what's wrong. All of these things are shaking salt.
Oh, absolutely.
To do that, and knowing that we're in it, we're in the world all the time. And so even in the interactions that aren't necessarily going to make it through the filter where somebody says, yes, I want to follow Jesus and I want to learn from you how, it still doesn't change the fact that we're constantly shaking that salt.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, 100%. And I think even involved in that is your value, which can also, I think, be a barrier. Is your value ultimately the bottom line, or is your value the kingdom? Right. Because as a co-vocational business person, and I know there are some who are the exception to this, but there's a very good chance, if there's competition in the market, whether you're in service or retail or whatever, that you may not, have the best bottom line in the market. You may not be the best store in the franchise when it comes to sales. But that's because all of your time and energy isn't just spent on the business itself. And, I think that's a great conversation Chuck had with a friend I work for now named Daniel, is he said, Daniel, you're going to have to be okay to not make the most money that you could make, at this, because at some point, something's got to give in your time,
right. Yeah, at some point it does.
Yeah. And so tying our success in the business world to what the business world would call success, and then also seeking to advance the kingdom with every effort in our being, with all the urgency that Jesus is going to come back tomorrow, those 2 things can't happen. And they're not mutually exclusive because you're doing them together, but because you're doing them together and shaking salt, if you give a customer a $400 payout because you ruined one of the garments because that was the Christian thing to do in that moment, you're out $400.
I'm out $400.
That relationship, and you can call it marketing money or whatever, but that relationship is salvaged, right? In the aspect of the kingdom.
We hope that relationship is salvaged. But yeah, that's the point is that we're moving it not only because we do want to continue to see our witness and our salt shook correctly, but also because it's just the right thing to do.
Oh, absolutely.
Regardless of the outcome.
Yeah, and right now for me in this season of life, I'm working in e-commerce and then obviously the travel and event business. But like in the e-commerce, especially on Amazon and Walmart, people get shipped the wrong things all the time. And you have the option to either be like, okay, we'll submit a warranty and we'll try to get around back to you, or take it as an opportunity to be like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm a follower of Jesus, and this is, one of the ways that we're commanded by our Savior to show care and love is to treat others the way that we want to be treated. So I'm going to send you another can. Just take their word for it. And it's amazing to see that response, because, people buy from all kinds of different e-commerce sellers.
Yeah, of course.
But when they get, legitimate, we'll call it a follower of Jesus customer service, it should be one that has salt on it, because who knows, how that seed could germinate down the road, or what conversation that could turn into.
So with all these like kind of barriers that we've kind of experienced, you and I are basically just saying these are the ones that we've experienced, just trying to get it done. That brings back the tension and the question of, there are some co-vocational opportunities that lend themselves better to movement than others.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's just some. So like for instance with ours, it is compared to some opportunities. So we've got a good friend named Tyler who has a window washing business. Okay, his initial investment into window washing is like $150 at Home Depot.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then a lot of elbow grease and a lot of legwork to go and get some business and some customers. Okay, so the entry point for someone into that business, the bar is very, very low, and they can get into it and they can do it. What costs them is the time that it takes to actually build the business.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. So then if you go into other businesses where you've got a $1 or a $2 or a $3 million initial investment, and then possibly some real estate costs and those kind of things, okay, that's going to limit the number of people who can get in that. So with that tension, and we're talking about business ownership here, in terms of co-vocational lifestyle, some of those are going to be reproducing. Yeah. Some of them are not. Yeah. Right. I'll put myself on the table. Ours is one of those that was going to be a significantly larger initial investment that the Lord supernaturally brought into my life. Yeah. That's not something that's just going to happen over and over and over on a regular basis.
No,
now, the Lord could do that, and there's still a potential that the Lord could do that. But then also understanding that my particular business requires a lot of extra skills that I just had to learn through the School of Hard Knocks. It requires a lot of time that, for instance, Tyler didn't have to go through and could just kind of get his business off the ground and then start sharing very, very quickly. So it is mindful. It makes sense to think through that if you want to create a model that's reproducing, the type of work matters.
Oh, absolutely. And I think too, going into that, the differences between e-commerce and retail and service and manufacturing always are going to lend themselves to different difficulties. And I think if you're a person on here that's not a business owner, and maybe you're working an hourly job somewhere, and you're saying, well, I'll be co-vocational as soon as I can get my own business up and running off the ground. Right. It's not going to work. It's almost like the idea that the missionary is going to really start sharing the gospel and making disciples once he makes the jump over the big blue ocean.
Right. Somehow that's magical. Going to the other side geographically is magic.
That's right. And so the best place to start is where you're at, and seeing and leveraging the opportunities in front of you for the kingdom, whether you're working as a barista at Starbucks or you own a multi-million-dollar corporation. Starting where Jesus has you is, I think one of the most important things to remember and learning in that season, because ultimately you'll be discipling others who are in your same season wherever you go to in the business world.
Right, and as you mature and as opportunities come your way, you'll have disciples that'll look and go, well, I'll be ready to do it whenever I get to where you are. And the answer is, well, we've been spending 6 years.
Yeah, that's right.
Right, we didn't start here either. Yeah, and I think, Carter, we can take what you just said, and even though Paul in 1 Corinthians 7 is specifically talking about singleness and marriage, his ultimate answer, whenever he comes down to it, it says, if you're married, stay married. If you're single, stay single.
That's right.
His point was, don't try to find another situation. Yeah. Remain in the situation that you're in and follow Jesus in that. Because that's where we're going to learn the most on that. So when do we start? The answer is now.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I Mark, who's not here with us today, but he always uses the Kleenex Box illustration. He says, God reveals his will and his plans to you as you take the next Kleenex out of the box. He's like, you can't get to the next one until you take the first step in front of you out. So if you say, well, once I get to Kleenex box number 4, then I'll get, but you can't get to that until you keep pulling out the ones that are in front of you. And, I think that can be a barrier in people's minds. And even going back to the mundane conversation, whether you do own an incredibly profitable multi-million-dollar business or you are an hourly worker. Yeah. No, yeah. Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
But whether you do or not, there's mundane in all of it.
There's mundane in all of it.
And so, and really, there's no difference in the amount of people that you can pour into in that situation, in one situation versus the other. I mean, you think of like a Life Church here in Oklahoma City, Craig Rochelle. Yeah, he has the ear of 33 something campuses, and I think they have like 500,000 members around the world. But himself as an individual before God can only pour into X amount of personal disciples,
right, in
which
that
is
witness relationship.
That's exactly right. And you're no different. I'm no different. Yeah. There's a reason why the Son of God only had 12 disciples and extended beyond that 120, is because I believe there are capacities within our ability to have a witness relationship with only a certain number of individuals. And so I think that's where we can tell ourselves, oh, I'm not being successful because I don't have 5,000 people in my church. Well, we would say Jesus is very unsuccessful. We would say Paul is very unsuccessful.
Well, he did have 5,000 plus, and then he ran them all off.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's right.
And then his 12 are standing there going,
yeah.
And he's like, you want to go too?
That's exactly right. Yeah, and so, Dave, I know we've run into a lot of this kind of the in between, the kind of the nonprofit segment or support raising and this and that. And I think, because you've been on full-time staff at a church,
sure, yeah.
And I have
14 years of pastoral ministry on church staffs, right?
And then I've had like 6, and then I was 5 years with a mission organization. And then I tried to fundraise, and it was terrible. That's right. It never worked for me. But I think what's funny is there's this misconception, especially in the movement world, that even if I'm working a job now, but if I can only go and work for a nonprofit and raise my own support, or maybe that's not going to be more work than what you're doing now, and that's a lie. It's all work. Whether you're working at a mega church or raising support, or you're working at a daily JOB. Having the idea, well, I'll really start to obey Jesus and leverage these relationships when I change, roles or positions or jobs. Just like you said, we need to be faithful in the state that the Lord has called us, and see what doors He opens elsewhere.
So whenever you pull this conversation back together, at the end of the day, this is the tension. We only have so much time.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's going to be that way.
Yeah.
We all have to make money to eat.
Yeah.
And to have clothes to wear. And yes, I realize and trust that the Lord will provide those things.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the main ways that the Lord provides that is through work with our hands, right? That's the vast super majority of people.
Yeah.
I do realize we have some stories, right?
Mm-hmm.
We've got
George Mueller,
and we've got one of his disciples that went to China, Hudson Taylor, right? That are phenomenal. But the reason that we read those stories is because they're crazy phenomenal stories. There's a reason there's a book written about, multiple books written about those two guys. For the vast majority of people who are involved, we got to go to work, got to make some money so that we can eat, have a house to live, close to where. That's the way in which we do it. Paul even says, if a man doesn't work, he doesn't eat. He set the example not to take their silver or gold, but to work with his hands to show them that. So with that being said, time, we only have so much.
Yeah.
Resources, we got to work in order to provide for what we want, and then our passion for wanting to see no place left. Those 3 are what create the tension.
Yeah.
But in the tension of those 3, I think really what happens is what loses focus is that what we're really after is not strategy. What we're really after is not tools. What we're really after, it's people.
Yeah, no, that's right.
At the end of the day, no place left is about me making sure that you have the opportunity to hear and respond to the gospel.
That's exactly right.
And no matter what I'm doing, there are people around me.
That's right.
And I think, I wouldn't say the trick, the focus is how do I keep people at the forefront
Mm-hmm.
in everything that I'm doing, so that when the Spirit of God makes an opportunity, I take advantage of that and have an opportunity to say that there's no place left in this moment. Because we can never get to no place left in the globe if we don't learn to get to no place left in every moment of a person that we're interacting with.
That's exactly right.
How are we going to get there if in this moment, with these people that are around me, I'm not working towards no place left right now?
No, that's good.
And that can happen in all of those realms.
That's good. That's really good.
Right.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think, you talking about passion, so you talked about time. Right. And obviously having to have resources and then in your passion. And I think alongside that is that derails us is when we try to find that passion and fulfillment in the actual vocation we're doing. Right. And I heard that the other day from one of my friends. He was like, I'm doing this job, but I don't really know if this is actually the one that will fuel my passion and I'll find fulfillment in. Right. And I don't think the Lord did not create us to find fulfillment and passion in just a tilling of the soil. Right. 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 And I think that can even, distract and discourage a co-vocational labor. A good test as any co-vocational person would be, what makes you happy and what makes you sad on a day-to-day basis. And if it's things that are revolving around your work with your hands, obviously things happen, but if it's constantly the only things that are driving your excitement and your sadness are things that only revolve around the 9 to 5 and the bottom line, then our value and our identity has been misplaced.
And even going back to, even if it's not a 9 to 5, because we have hourly people, but absolutely. Like that bottom line, whether it be the paycheck that I get or the money that my business makes.
That's right.
Because
the amount of zeros that are in my checking account.
Right. I would love to have 9 to 5.
Yeah, that's right.
My schedule, people are like, what is your schedule? And my answer is, when there's a problem, that's my schedule.
Yeah, that's right.
And so my wife sometimes is like, hello, just because I can't control those things, which gets into that tension on that time. Yeah. But I think you're dead on, Carter, because if Christ is our focus and people are our heartbeat, then we can find fulfillment in just about anything that we do.
Yeah, that's right.
Just about. Now I realize we're going to hedge off the things that are scripturally.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Like, forbid.
Yeah.
And I also understand that the tension of you need to do what you're skilled at and what you're passionate about in order to enjoy it.
Yeah.
Right? Because there are certain things, like if I was to sharpen pencils 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, I'd go insane. Yeah. I get that. But also I think your point is coming back and going, if the bottom line are the zeros in your bank account, that's the wrong God.
Yeah, that is the wrong. You can't serve with God in that bottom line.
Yeah. Who you're working with now, Daniel. When we were doing the No Place Left Summit, and he said, I was like, oh, he articulated it perfectly. It's like, when I'm in the business world, no one understands the movement, disciple-making side of things. Yeah. When I'm in the mission disciple-making world, they don't understand the business. And so when you're CoVo, it's like every group of people you're with doesn't really understand you.
Yeah, that's right.
Right? And what we want to say is, there is a group of people who understand you.
That's exactly
that it's not that we have a foot in both worlds, it's that those worlds are one for us. Yeah. And that tension is something that we get, we understand, and we actually celebrate because people are what matter.